This video is all about FineTec's newest metallic watercolor palette. I'll be unboxing, swatching, and painting 4 illustrations. I'm going to be talking about the new 4 Elements palette by FineTec. This palette is not yet available in the United States, but I'm sure that it will be shortly. As an art ambassador for Royal Talons, the company that owns FineTec, they've asked me to paint 1 illustration to represent each one of the elements for some new display signage that will be used on the racks for selling these FineTec sets. I have a couple other videos that go over the FineTec properties and features in great detail, so if you're interested in learning a lot about these paints, go ahead and click on the card up in the top corner. Otherwise, I'm just basically going to be going over some of the properties as I paint. The high quality colors are in these really lightweight aluminum reusable palettes. And as you can see, there are 12 colors here on the top. This is a 24 set palette, so you can lift that top out. And altogether, you have 24 colors. Each row of 6 colors represents one of the elements. The first one is fire, 6 really high chroma colors. This next row represents the water element. Next up we have earth, and these ones are supposedly satin finish. This one has really classical metallic tones like gold, silver, copper, and bronze. And lastly we have air. And as you can see, these ones look quite different from the others. They are iridescent colors as opposed to pearlescent. One of the most commonly asked questions that I receive when demoing the FineTec paints are about the texture that is on top of each of the pans. That unique ripple is because each of the pans are hand poured. The pans can easily be replaced and snapped in and out of the palettes, so they're also customizable. Here is the spec sheet for the FineTec Premium 4 Elements set that I received. I just wanted to show that off in case anybody was interested in the specifics. Before I begin designing what I want to paint, I thought it would be useful to make a swatch chart on black paper to see how these colors react. I'm going to start off with fire for the first row, then I'll move on to water, earth, and lastly air. And I'm going to talk about these more in depth as we go through and paint each of the illustrations. Now I'm just using a white Posca marker to label each of my colors, and a black eraser to erase any of my lines. Next I'm going to be gluing some strips of white 140-pound watercolor paper onto my swatch sheet using a pH neutral glue. I'll go through with each color and paint right on top of that watercolor paper. You'll see that all of the pearlescent colors work wonderfully on both black and white paper. The only differences are the duotone colors, which are the ones that shift color, and also the iridescent colors in the air selection. And here is one final glamour shot of all of the colors together. It's always difficult to capture metallics on black paper through video, so I hope that it comes through okay. Here are the materials that I'm going to be using to complete my illustrations today. I'll start off with black watercolor paper by Van Gogh. Of course, I'm going to be using the 4 Elements Premium FineTec set. I'm going to be using Oxide Black Amsterdam acrylic ink. Also a water mister to spray my palette before I begin painting. These stackable mixing wells are wonderful for keeping your palette clean. I'll also be using these brushes by Princeton. Any watercolor brushes will work just fine with the FineTec paints. And a black eraser is really wonderful for getting rid of pencil lines. I'll be doing the illustrations in order of the elements, starting with fire. Now, as I was saying, I always like to spray my paints before I begin. These are really dry pans, so it just saves you a lot of time. You get a lot more color payoff easily if you spray to begin with. You can paint with the FineTec paints on white paper as well as black, but on black you get a really striking effect immediately. Each of the fish designs need to showcase every one of the colors in their selection. With that being said, I'm using the warm colors for the fish itself, and with the very tip of my brush, I'm doing long linear brush strokes. That's providing a lot of movement in the fins and also helping to form shape without having to worry about tone. I'm essentially just using color for this illustration to define my edges and planes. As I work, I'm also using a little bit of black ink. Because I'm working on black paper, I'm using the actual paint plus a little bit of water to create my shadows. It's the opposite of working on white paper. Now when I use my black ink, I'm able to go back over top of areas with something that's more opaque, and that will help me add shadow or perhaps cover an area completely. One special paint to note in the Fire Element collection is the blue-purple color. And this one is called a duotone color. So you will just go ahead and paint it just like all the other pearlescent colors. However, when this color dries, it will actually have two different colors to it. This one is blue and violet. I thought that this unique effect would be perfect for the smoke. Overall, I think that the Fire selection of colors is wonderful. These, again, are very high chroma colors, extremely saturated, and because of the color selection, you're able to mix colors that are not in the set. The two-tone color is always a welcome, fun addition as well. Next up is the water collection. This one has quite a few different cool colors, along with another two-tone color that I'll highlight in a little bit. I'm just starting off with a lot of water on the body of this water fish, and then I'm going back through with my black ink just to sort out my details. For this one, there's quite a lot going on between all the fins and the coral, so I tried to limit my fish just to the blue and the greens. The white in this palette, I believe, has real silver in it. I know that some of the FineTec premium colors do have silver in them, and this white paint is really chunky and a lot thicker than the others. It does have a really high shining effect to it as well. I completed my coral with that standard gold, and then I did the details in the two-tone. The two-tone color in this selection is called blue gold. When viewed from one angle, it really gives my coral a lot of shadow and form because it's kind of a blue hue, and then when viewed from another angle, it's actually a gold, so it kind of just blends in with the coral. So a very unique two-tone that I think is very complementary to this selection of colors. At the last moment, I also decided to use the two-tone color to do a couple different watermarks, kind of indicating some more movement for the fish. Because of the nature of how metallic paints are viewed, I feel like they're always shifting and moving, so I wanted all of my illustrations for this particular project to have a lot of movement in them. And I did that by building up the small lines and using the different types of metallics. They work with and against each other at the same time. The next fish that I'm going to do is going to be the earth fish. Now, this set is supposed to have more of a satin finish and less of a sparkling effect. I'm going to be using the paints the same way that I did with the fire. You're just going to use a lot more water if you want it to have a soft edge. These paints are really versatile in that respect. you can have fine, crisp lines easily, or just by using a little bit of water, you can really blur the edges. Now, because of all the pigmentation in this paint, I do find that those mica pigments float around a little bit and self-level. So you can't be as intentional as you would be with your standard watercolor, as these pigments tend to float around in any area that you get wet. That's also why black ink is wonderful for adding more details on top of the foundation of a previously dried wash. I find that the most important thing when working on black watercolor paper with a metallic paint is clarity. Because your entire painting is metallic, sometimes you can lose a little bit of clarity. So going back through with that black ink helps me with my edges and just keeps everything really crisp and clean. So you'll see me going back through and adding that black ink in wherever I think I may need it, which is normally areas that need more contrast or to help refine an edge. Despite the selection of classical colors, I was underwhelmed with the satin finish that the colors claim to have. With that being said, the colors are gorgeous, but they're just definitely not a satin finish. Next up, we have the air colors. These are an iridescent type of paint as opposed to the pearlescent paint. You can immediately tell because of how they look in the palette. They kind of have a milky glow to them. At first glance, they all look white, but after giving them a little bit of water, you'll see a slight color in the pan that will help you differentiate them. It's also really helpful to have the swatches off to the side just so that you can see how each color will look like on the paper. These are unique from the pearlescent colors because the more you build them up, the more they're going to have a white, milky effect to them. These iridescent paints are sometimes referred to as mother of pearl, and that's because they get that really beautiful kind of marbled white effect when they're built up. So you'll see me go back through the body of the fish and really pile them up in the center for the highlights. I think that these are a wonderful addition to the existing iridescent colors that are in FineTec's line. I particularly enjoyed the dusk blue, which is the purple that you can see throughout. The air metallic sheen is interesting because when viewed from the side, you get a really desaturated look. After taking many photos and trying to get the colors in the right light, and then digitally removing their background, here are the digital assets that we ended up with. Here's a last look at each of the elements. You guys will have to let me know down in the comments which one is your favorite. I had a lot of fun illustrating these and thinking of the concept, so I hope that Royal Talons likes them too. I unfortunately don't have any proofs or anything at this time to show you how that display signage will look with my art on it, but once I do, I'll definitely post it in the community tab here on YouTube. So thanks so much guys for watching this video, and I hope you have a wonderful week.